This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agnew.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agnew. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Terence Bennett. He is the CEO of DreamFactory, one of my favorite names for any company. Terence, hello, my friend. How are you?
Hey Jay, really good to be here. I always joke either we sell pillows or sleeping pills at Dream Factory. Not really sure which one.
I like either one. Where did the name come from? Let's start there.
It was inherited. So Dream Factory was inherited from the original team who built the product. And it was actually used for a number of different products over the course of years. If you go on archive.org on the Wayback Machine, you can find some of the old websites, and they're definitely a blast from the past, like circa 1998. But yeah.
I love that. I love that. It wasn't Dream Factory the name of some band too, or some.
Oh man,
I'm gonna have
it
to look
pops
it
up
up
everywhere.
now.
There's a balloon
Yeah.
company in New Jersey that called Dream Factory.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right. All right. So I mean, it's a great name. I love it. Well, tell me about you. Where did you grow up, and did that have any impact on you being an entrepreneur?
yeah. I grew up originally outside New York and then Florida, and my parents were actually kind of in their own right. I think of them as sort of entrepreneurs. They were artists, ended up in the sort of jewelry manufacturing space,
Mm-hmm.
and then started their own business. That's when we moved to Florida. And I always joke that when your parents are hippies, my mom literally went to Woodstock in '69. How do you rebel? Well, you join the military and become an intelligence officer, which is exactly what I did. But the military, you don't think of as a place that where entrepreneurs would thrive, but they kind of do in their own right. And I'm happy to get into that later. But there's definitely an entrepreneurial aspect to being a junior officer and just having to get things done, how to get things done.
A little more about that. I mean, you don't. I mean, I would definitely not equate military with creativity or like the ability to express oneself or build something or whatever. How do you kind of connect those two?
So as a junior officer, specifically in the Navy, right, at a high level, in the Navy, the tradition is, right, the commanding officer would be given a task, a mission, and, off go the lines, the ropes, if you will, and the ship sails away. There's no satellite comms. There's no, like, here's a task, go get it done, right? Which in many ways isn't that different than business. Like,
Right.
go grow a company, right? Go find customers. And that's where a lot of the Navy culture comes from. But I mean, here's just a story. I was the embarked intelligence officer on a small ship off the coast of West Africa. We had a bunch of equipment on board. We'll get into the specifics. And a bunch of it got seawater in it. And electronics don't like seawater.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a mission, which was to be able to collect a bunch of intelligence, and my systems were down. So go to the team and I say, well, what are our workarounds? I have some back and forth. One of the guys says, I have an S cable connector on this transceiver. If we could run that down to the laptop, I think we might be in business. So we went and got essentially, borrowed a van
Mm-hmm.
from base
Right.
and drove out into a village in rural Ghana, and drove around until we found a audio supply store about 200 feet of S cable, like audio cable.
Mm-hmm.
We brought it back to the ship and we rigged the whole thing up and we were live. It all worked. So,
Wow.
you know, if you ask people in the service, you'll hear these kinds of stories, and that's the kind of just get it done however way is
Mm-hmm.
necessary attitude. Often technically, because we live in a technical world, right?
Right.
Technical equipment that the military, that's kind of attitude and mentality of the military, especially the Navy, I think,
I
can
love
be.
that. Well, thank you for your service, by the way. And yeah, no, you think of the military as kind of just like doing it all right the first time, and I think that there's like you're saying, there's this whole, just like anything, like everything from the surface looks like it's great and they're executing and everything. And it's just like, you're right. I mean, the same thing with every business, right? On the surface, it looks calm. And then underneath, everything is just like absolute chaos. So I love that connection. So talk to me about your first business that you ever started, you ever owned, you ever did. Is it Dream Factor or is there something before this?
So I did run a small business in high school. I was a kid going door to door doing tech support.
Love
This is
that.
back before, I'm gonna age myself, back before, Geek Squad, but it was actually very good money, for what it's worth. I don't think that really counts. When I was in DC, actually, still in service, couldn't really start a business on my own, not in the traditional sense, but I was bored. I ended up at a hackathon focused on schools in
Mhm.
DC, and I ended up inadvertently starting a nonprofit with a bunch of teachers. I was kind of the techie. This is like around 2015. It was called Capital Experience Lab. I helped sort of run the kind of the back end system stuff, and we meet up like a few times a year, do like kind of deep dives, like brainstorming sessions and whatnot. But ultimately, it was I moved away and I was busy with a lot of other stuff, started a family. Capital Experience Lab has actually turned into a charter school in DC. So
Wow.
it lives on in a very cool way. But, yeah, it felt like a business at the time. I was super excited. We're trying to figure out how to go from 0 to 1 around this idea of creating experiential sort of learning activities for public school students in DC,
Mhm.
we got it off and running as first as a summer program, then after school program, and then a charter school.
Wow. Love that. So what was the fast forward to the to Dream Factory? I mean, you mentioned it was a product company, and now I know you got to do a lot in the enterprise API space. Like how, where,
Yeah.
what, how did you get to that point?
So when I got out, I joined Google, first on the cloud team and then on the cybersecurity kind of red teaming side. I thought I wanted to go into cybersecurity. And I quickly realized that cybersecurity is largely around either you're deeply technical and you're like a SME around like hunting hackers
Mhm.
or in red teaming being a hacker, or you're kind of in the program management, like auditing space.
Right.
And it just didn't feel like a fit for me and my personality. And so I really had the itch to go to the startup side. And so I left and I first joined a small company called Team Password, kind of on the ops side.
Mhm.
And that went really well. And I sort of pivoted from that into Dream Factory. So yeah, first in ops role and then into I took over leadership.
What about your personality didn't align with cybersecurity? Like with those couple things?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm quite dyslexic. Dyslexia is poorly understood, unfortunately. Condition, I think there's a bit of a spectrum on with anything around dyslexia. But the way I sort of explain dyslexia is that most of the world kind of operates in a very kind of linear thinking approach. Think of like the rules to like a card game versus I think dyslexia and dyslexic thinking is largely a set of strengths around lateral thinking.
Hmm.
And a lot of dyslexic people seem to thrive in a lot of kind of non-traditional intelligence areas, right?
Mhm.
One of the models of intelligence is there's like nine types of intelligence. You've got like what you think of sort of traditional, kind of like reading, writing. There's like mathematical intelligence. There's spatial reasoning.
Mhm.
There's storytelling, and I am not great with sort of strict systems and adhering to systems and applying systems. So
Hmm.
actually, frankly, the stuff AI is phenomenal at are the things I am horrible at and I really dislike.
Okay.
And
How did you know that? Like, how did you learn that about yourself enough to kind of shape your career around it? Like, I mean, how did you
yeah,
kind of identify like I'm better at this than this?
it's a phenomenal question. So I'm really thankful that Google has a huge network of what they call employee resource groups. And for me, joining the dyslexia group ended up being this like huge kind of opportunity for self-exploration and self-discovery around dyslexia and like what does that really mean? And
Mhm.
it all started because I was trying to get access to Grammarly, right? Like I knew I was dyslexic and I knew I'm really bad at grammar and I need this tool. Like I use this tool all the time every day. And
Right.
I couldn't get access to it. And so then it turned into this like advocacy thing where like I need Grammarly to
Right.
function, right?
Yep.
And I got really involved with the group and then out of that, I ended up researching a ton about dyslexia to try and kind of build the argument back. That was
Mhm.
unsuccessful, but I ended up learning a lot about myself. And there's a phenomenal amount of research out there. It's like highly academic and you wouldn't discover it unless you were like really looking for it. So
I'm sensing like a community network kind of theme with you. You know, it seems like, the nonprofit and, the Grammarly, the dyslexic group, like it seems like you understand the power of these collective groups and like the networking and the ecosystem that's kind of around it. How have
mhm.
you or do you apply that to your business today?
It's an interesting question. Yeah. We're a small team, 10 employees. So I do really work hard to build a camaraderie, a team work based kind of mentality and almost like a family kind of dynamic.
Mhm.
I think a lot of it for me around trust. No one wakes up first thing in the morning saying like, "I'm gonna be a dirtbag. I'm gonna get by doing absolutely as little as possible."
I
No
think
one
some
does.
people do. I think some people do. I know enough people that I think there's no way that they act the way they act if they don't think that in the morning. But anyway, yeah, you're probably right.
Well, everyone's operating on this sort of spectrum of capabilities, right, in different ways.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are just kind of beat down by life, and they end up just kind of like reducing themselves to this kind of minimum level of functionality that they can get away with, and they don't wake up with the intent of doing the bare minimum. But they also don't wake up with the intent of trying their hardest, perhaps, right?
Right. Yep.
And being a winner. And I think it comes down to leadership in a lot of ways, right? Getting to know your people, getting to a place where you can inspire them, that you know them
Mhm.
at a level and a depth where you can find the projects that you know are going to inspire them to show up and put in their all. And you're not going to give them the projects that beat them down, right?
Right.
Like,
Yep.
like my point about cybersecurity, like the last thing on earth I want is to run a checklist. It's just soul crushing to me. There's some people out there who love checklists.
Yes.
My wife's in compliance. That's essentially checklists, right? She's often writing them. So, that's leadership is like knowing your people, understanding your people and their strengths and their personalities so you can get the best out of them every single day.
Yeah.
And I mean that to me is like that's really like leadership and people and ultimately community. It's all kind of the same conversation.
I love that. Tell me about Dream Factory, man. Where did you come into the mix? What is
Yeah.
it today? What's the Dream Factory story?
Yeah, so Dream Factory is the repo is actually coming up on 10 years old. It's a really cool product. It's kind of been through a lot of different iterations because it's just a very different way of thinking about API integrations. If for those out there that are kind of familiar with APIs and how you'd go about building them, right? You typically kind of work with requirements of like, what do I need this thing to do? And I'm
Right.
going to work my way backwards through like building open API specs and then ultimately to the data, right?
Yep.
We do the opposite. We kind of assume that organizations have a data model that they like and it works, and they got a schema that works. And so we're going to actually expose all of those tables, views, or stored procedures as potential endpoints. And then the administrator, the user, can go in and identify exactly what they want to expose, what kind of access, read only or full CRUD or whatever, and then like layer on the necessary security around auth or keys or rate limiting, logging, auditing, monitoring, that kind of stuff. And as a tool, just got me really excited because it's such a radically different way of thinking about integrations and software integrations specifically. And coming from the military, actually, I worked sort of IT systems for large parts of my time in the Navy. Like this is exactly what they need, right?
Mhm.
Integrations are often the long pole in the tent and are this huge barrier to getting data where it needs to be. As an intelligence officer specifically, getting all the data in one place in real time so you can start to inform the models and inform systems is huge, right? And so a lot of the work we're doing is around public sector defense because it's a huge opportunity.
Love it. Well, who was your first customer?
So we inherited a fair amount of customers, right?
Did
But
you buy the company? Sorry, let's take one step back. Did you buy
yeah,
the
yeah,
company? How did you kind of
yeah.
take over at the helm?
So we're actually owned by a parent company called Xenon, and
Okay.
so I was brought in by them to run it, or, first on the ops side and then as leadership.
Mm.
Xenon is sort of what you call like a micro cap firm that buys specifically B2B developer tools, and so there's a huge kind of knowledge base within that group around how to do this and how to do it well. And a lot of our best ideas are coming from those folks and those advisors around, where the opportunities are, where we should focus our attention.
Mhm.
But yeah, to answer your question, my first customer, this is sort of the point, and I should have gone back and actually looked at the data. But one of the ones that's really memorable is a company called Saint-Gobain. It's actually a French manufacturer. They made some of the mirrors in Louis the 14th like palace, right? This company's been around for like
Right.
an absurd amount of time, like
Right.
1400s, and they have a huge footprint across Europe. They own a ton of product companies themselves, and it's a huge integration challenge because it's decades and decades worth of technology,
Mhm.
and being able to work them through the discovery process and seeing their eyes light up as they saw the potential and possibility was really kind of made me fall in love with Dream Factory and the product because it is such a broadly powerful and flexible tool. The limiter is often the imagination.
Right.
of customers, right? Of people, you know. By the way, DreamFactory is open source. So if you're out there and you want to play around with it, the Postgres connector is open source, and there's a bunch of sort of additional connectors that are on the commercial license.
Why make your stuff open source? I mean, maybe that decision was made before you or whatever, but just in general terms for people who don't know, why would you are you giving away the farm with that? Are you is it some altruistic kind of thing? Like what is why make something open source?
You know, altruism isn't necessarily the way to think about it, but there's a paying it forward attitude with open source software. Because the fact is, sort of everything's built on the top of something else. So there's definitely a side of that. You know, I don't necessarily believe all software should be free, but I think a internet and software ecosystem built on open source software is more powerful than an internet built on proprietary software. Right?
Mhm.
Open standards have to be open by nature, and no one would be able. The internet wouldn't be what it is if we didn't have a set of open standards, right? And
Right.
someone has to build that and maintain that. And that inherently, there's open source software there, but it's also like the ultimate freemium play.
Right.
It's the ultimate sort of free trial kind of play.
Yep.
So there's a huge business reason to being open source as well, or open core as that people kind of refer to it, which is that you get some indie hacker who's playing with the stuff on the weekends, and he's spinning up Dream Factory servers and building out a bunch of tooling. Maybe it's for a friend, or maybe it's just for a fun project. And then he sees a problem at work, and he's like, "Oh, you know what? You know what would work here." So
Right.
I mean, that happens all the time, right? And it's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Love it. Who is your customer today versus when you kind of took over his leadership role and like how has that changed since then?
Yeah, that actually ties in some ways to open source, right? I think a lot of businesses have aggressively moved towards the open source model in the hope of trying to do as much as they possibly can for free, and then they'll sort of spend the money on consultants, specifically kind of this, I think, the small and medium sector. So we've actually inadvertently kind of moved up market because developers in large companies want to work with open source software. They're more likely to come across open source software, but they also recognize the need to buy software. In many cases, it's kind of like a CYA sort of thing, right?
Mhm.
Whereas I think the software market for a lot of small medium has kind of collapsed into like very inexpensive SaaS tools. Think
Yep.
of your like, 19.99 a month, 39.99 a month kind of type tools, right? And a lot of those are also strictly sort of hosted, SaaS offerings, not sort of on-prem.
Right.
So I've actually, maybe this is kind of why I love Saint-Gobain as a customer, is we've moved up market and largely towards legacy industries. So manufacturing, oil and gas to a certain degree, and government, right? And so that was, it makes me actually wonder now how much of that's like the things I was passionate about and focused on. But nonetheless, it's sort of where we found more and more of a niche.
Yeah, I mean, and I think as the more I sit in this seat as the business owner of our business to keep me engaged purposefully, we've had to kind of try to figure out who we're going to align ourselves towards, right? And it's like
Yeah.
you don't always get to do the things that you love or you're passionate about or you're excited about, but if you can or you can get closer to that space, by providing services, it's a pretty powerful motivation tool for yourself to just continue to go because we've all been in jobs that we just kind of our eyes glaze over, or even as a CEO, like you can be doing stuff for so long, you're just like, all right, here's another one, here's another, and it's just not like fulfilling this like need that you have. And whether like for us, we've been leaning more on region lately. So instead of just like picking some vertical that we think we want to go after that we might be interested in, because I mean, no offense to anyone, but I'm going to say it out loud like fintech, healthcare, ecom, they're all boring as shit, right? I mean, they're all the same. I mean, there's some stuff and they're great
Yeah.
product and they're whatever, but like, so we didn't really have a vertical that we felt passionate about, but we can work in most verticals because for the most part, we have experience in just about everything. So instead of just picking a vertical to say we picked a vertical, we're starting to lean towards more region based where it's like we're going to serve the city of Philadelphia and be the QA company of Philadelphia instead of just being like an automotive testing software company or automotive software testing company or a healthcare or like whatever, and just picking something we're kind of interested in. I think
Yeah.
being able to connect with the people that you're close to physically, and also by the way, I always call it the hometown discount. Like talking to somebody from where you're from is so much easier than talking to somebody even in a city over, right? Because like the same sports
100%.
teams are here, you know, all the museums and the, you know, the things, and you talk about kids and school, and there's just so much of this like free sales collateral that comes from like being in the same location. So we've, you know, I think there's a lot to be said around like you've kind of wrapped your way back around to, you know, serving those government orgs that maybe you felt the pain point in that you really feel like you're passionate about fixing because you're like, I was that guy sitting in that
100%.
boat trying to collect that data. So it's cool that you've kind of wrapped back around to maybe something that you're passionate about. So how do you manage personal brand at all? Do you care about it? Do you think about it? Is there like a Terrence that's not Dream Factory Terrence? Is it all tied together? Like, what's your thought on like how you promote yourself and who you are versus the company?
Yeah, I like to say I made a deliberate decision that it's all myself, but I don't think I've got the bandwidth to try and play multiple characters. It's just not who I am. I am pretty careful to not get into politics on social platforms. As an intelligence officer, I never had Instagram or Facebook for through a lot of my sort of core years, right? Like
Right.
I had sort of Facebook in college and then I deleted it. Never spent time on Twitter or TikTok. So LinkedIn's kind of where I've invested a lot of time and energy. And I just, for me, it's I talk a lot. We talk a lot about I talk a lot about work. I say we, we try and use the factory account as much as possible as well. Technology, AI, stuff across sort of industries, stuff that's like work adjacent, perhaps like work from home stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, I try and kind of leave like personal politics off of the internet because I think we've all seen how that doesn't age well, and it's kind of irrelevant, right? Like I'm working with public sector, like just like in the military, like, it doesn't actually make a big difference to me. I'm gonna sell the government, federal government in this case, regardless.
Right.
So, but yeah, just me. That's just one version.
You're bound to piss off 50% of the people if you say anything about politics. Why anybody says anything on social media that has a public facing company, I don't understand. Like I get being passionate and I get like whatever, but good lord, man, like you're gonna piss people off. Like why would you discount or lose business before you even get it, you know, just to get some opinion out about, you know, whatever it is that you're, you know, you're trying to put out in the world. So I totally agree with that. Keep the fucking politics off your social media. Please, anybody who has a business. It just doesn't make sense. You're gonna piss somebody off.
Also, like, where's the ROI? Like,
I
I'm
mean, I guess you're thinking like if you speak to your fellow political agreement people that are like, "Oh yeah, like totally, I believe," and maybe that's like a thing where you're gaining people who are also on your side. I don't. I'm in the same boat as you. I don't get it. I don't. It doesn't make any sense to me to alienate anybody, even if you're winning over some percentage. That means you're inherently losing a percentage of business because you want to put some opinions out there in the ether. So, I'm very much on the same page. All right, I have one more question for you. This is just about you. This is not about Dream Factory. It's not about anything else. If you could do anything on Earth and you knew you wouldn't fail, what would it be?
oh man, if I could do anything on earth and I knew I wouldn't fail, I'm gonna go kind of altruistic, and I'd say I'd try and feed the world.
There you go. You can't fail in
I
this
just like
scenario. You can
there's
do whatever
no
you want.
well also like what are the negative like secondary tertiary effects of people, feeding kids? You know what I mean? I mean, I guess potential overpopulation, but they're already here, so
Yeah, bad about every. I mean, Americans eat like enough for like four people, so I don't know why. Like, I don't know that it's like we're not proven or dis. I mean, we're throwing away half the food now. If you fed people with it, would it be that big of a problem? I don't know.
it's true. It's true.
Um, All right. Well,
Pretty good one though.
we talked about it. I love that answer. We talked about it before the show, but you know, there's some quick reads you can get on people and you can go, that person's a good person or that person's a shitty person. And I definitely got the good person vibe from you. I connected you with a couple of my really close friends and partners, and they felt the same way. So thank you for just being a good guy, one of the good guys. And I love what you got going on. If people want to reach out to you because of something they heard today, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that, Jay. Like I said, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find me at Terence Bennett, or Terrence can be hard for some folks to spell. If you just look up Dream Factory, you'll find me there as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
beautiful. All right, man. Well, thank you for being on. Keep kicking ass. Have a happy spring, and hopefully we get to catch up again soon. All right.
absolutely. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Terrence. Have a good one, buddy.
Bye.
See you later.